Hello, everybody. My name is Martijn Lofvers. I'm Chief Trendwatcher of Supply Chain Media. You might also know me as Editor-in-Chief of Supply Chain Movement, the quarterly European magazine, and also the bi-weekly newsletter. Welcome to this exciting webinar, Innovating into the Future Part 2. So we started last week with the first part, and now we come to the execution part, so real stuff, I would say. So welcome, everybody. So with me, I have Sean Culey. He's author of a great book called Transition Point. Sean, hello.
Hi, everyone. Nice to be here. Thanks, Martin.
All right. So, like I said, this is the second part of a series of 2 webinars. And just short recap of what we discussed last time. So basically, there's a survey by McKinsey 10 years ago. And basically, 1 out of 3 of the companies have a competitive strategy, so something to beat the competition. But only 1 out of 5 has made a link between the company strategy and their supply chains. So 80% of the companies have a missing link between business strategy and supply chain, and that's worrisome. And then another part is within the companies of success, within successful companies, only 75% of the employees know how they contribute to the company's success. So 25 of the employees within successful organizations, these 25 people don't know what they're contributing to the company's success. And within lesser successful companies, 60% of the employees don't know how to contribute. So there's a whole pool of wasted talent, I would say. And what are successful companies doing? They do scenario planning. They look into the future, and that's what we have discussed in the previous webinar. And basically, they have a clear story, and they do a lot of visualizations. And that's when we come up with the framework of a mind map. So this is how the framework would look like. On our upper left side, you begin with the market trends, then you go on to the impact on the company, and then you go to the supply chain challenges now and in the near future, and then you come out with an overview of the supply chain solutions, and then you talk about technology and all kind of new stuff. And we'll discuss this in this webinar. Basically, what we did in the first webinar last week, we talked about the market trends, so demographic, economic, sociological, technological, ecological, and political trends. How do these trends impact your company? And then we talk, how do they impact the different kind of business function within your company, not only supply chain, but also finance, marketing, sales, supply chain, IT, HR, R&D, or even legal. And then you got to the first quadrants, that's the strategic layer, and then you move into the supply chain challenges. Then you get into the execution layer. And now within this webinar, we're going to talk about supply chain challenges and supply chain solutions to get a roadmap to get you into the future. So, okay, now we talk to the third quadrant. Well, you have your departments: plan, source, make, deliver, service, and return. And that's, you want to map out all these challenges right now and into the near future, because things are changing. And what we see in the market, we have questions 106 manufacturing companies in Europe. A lot of investments in supply chain software solutions, and we ask, what are you planning to do plan to invest in the next 12 months? And SNLP is stopping it. That you see it on lowest bar, and end-to-end supply chain visibility is the next one. And you see that the more advanced companies with a level 4 or 5 supply chain out of 5, they are looking especially in end-to-end supply chain visibility. So over to you, Sean. So, you talked about the 5th and the 6th wave, the conflict waves. So how will things change in this 5th and 6th wave?
Well, I think one of the most interesting paradigm shifts that's going to take place is the 5th wave, the supply chain, and all the other ways. The supply chain was effectively defined as being optimal if you didn't hear about it. So we always got talked about the invisible supply chain. So that's a supply chain that no one heard about, which meant that actually it was doing okay. And it was always a bit of a thankless task for a supply chain director, really. If you're doing your job really, really well, no one's really interested in you or what's going on, and you only kind of got sort of boardroom attention when things went wrong. So, you know, a little bit of a thankless task really when that you only got the CEO's attention when you had some major problems. And because of that, most of the emphasis was on cost control, which led us down paths such as offshoring to places where there were labor was lower cost. So it was really about out of sight, out of mind kind of supply chain. Now, there's a number of different paradigm shifts that are happening, and some of which are technological, but obviously some of them are in your other things earlier, which you talked about, so sociological and ecological, where companies have really been burned through having their extended supply chain exposed to the world because things have ultimately gone wrong, and we've realized that actually we're not in complete control of this particular supply chain. Not only are we not in complete control of it, but we don't actually have visibility on it. So in this sixth wave, what we're now saying is really actually the optimal supply chain is not the invisible supply chain, but the one that's most visible and most transparent, the one where we can see end to end. And everyone's talking about this. And one of the questions I always ask is, what do we mean by visibility? Do people know what they actually mean by visibility, or is it just another buzzword? People talk about digitally enabling more visibility all the time, but again, visibility of what? What is the benefit of visibility? What parts of your organization are you blind, but now you need to see? And it's no good just saying, well, I have access to more data than ever before, unless again you can define exactly how that data is going to help you achieve your objectives. So when we come to visibility, I think there's three real primary elements that companies need to have visibility of. And the first one I think is the most obvious, which is the visibility of flows. And by flows, I mean, the flows of product and services throughout the physical supply chain, the flows of information and data, and the flow of money. Now, one of my mantras has always been that you can't control what you don't understand, and you can't improve what you're unable to control. So we need to start by understanding. So the first primary benefit of being able to get more visibility, specifically through a lot of these new sort of disruptive and digital technologies, is understanding the flow of physical products, so that we can develop things like a geo map that shows where our components and supplies actually come from, where they are transformed, and ultimately where they go. And then we also be able to look at things like the flow of information to understand how long the actual process takes, how long our lead times are, how much product do we have in our supply chain, where is it located, what is its shelf life. And then when we understand the flow of data, we can look at both transactional and master data and basically understand what's actually needed to make the processes work, and where do we have disconnects in our processes so that we actually lose track of that data, or that data is not at a high level of integrity. And then finally, we need to have visibility of the flow of money, so that we can see where it ultimately changes hands, what our payment terms are, what contracts we have signed up to. Many times I see companies that actually very much commercially focused, and they sign up to commercial contracts that actually puts the supply chain immediately on the back foot from the get-go. And it's because they don't have visibility of the different business rules or contracts across the end-to-end supply chain. How long does it cash out turn to cash in? What is our cash to cash cycle time? So we need to have visibility of the flows of physical product and services, information and money, so that we can start to answer some of those questions.
But there are also bottlenecks and challenges.
Oh, exactly. So, but as I say, we can't control what we don't understand. So by understanding this, it then enables us to have visibility of our costs, our constraints, and our risks in our supply chain. We understand where our supply chain starts and ends, what nodes it goes through. We can start to then drill down in and sort of take the macro and turn it much more into a micro element. So this understanding enables a level of control, enables a level of understanding control around our consumption, both from water and energy, our level of waste in our supply chain, and also the issues, constraints, and risks. So we can start to ask real questions and start to understand how we as an organization are exposed, where we have risks, how much do we pay for services, where do we waste money, waste time, waste inventory, waste resources, where do we have duplicate or redundant processes, where do we lose reliability, what slows down our responsiveness, where do we lose agility, which suppliers hurt us through poor performance and which ones could hurt us if they collapsed or had bad practices. And ultimately what we're really trying to figure out here is, is our supply chain fragile and is it set up for success? And by being set up for success, I mean, is it set up, in order to deliver the strategic outcomes that we wanted to deliver? And if not, where? Now, one of the most interesting things is actually, and it's becoming increasingly important, is that once we have that visibility, now we're starting to see the visibility of the impact of our supply chain. And, once we understand that supply chain is nodes, our suppliers and our suppliers, it allows for visibility into current and potential supply chain exposure through bad practices. And this understanding allows for control and improvement, not just at a tactical and transactional level, but actually much more at a strategic level. It enables companies to make conscious choices, more informed strategic network designs and implementation of better, more ethical and ecological friendly practices that ensures, not just the short-term profitability of the company, but also its long-term success, as well as the protection of the planet and some of the most vulnerable population. Because these things have hurt businesses big time. These, ethical practices or ecological elements that have been pushed to the background once we were only interested in having an invisible supply chain. Suddenly, when they come to the fore, they don't just hurt the supply chain, they hurt the entire brand. And we've seen billions of dollars being knocked off companies' values because they've simply, not really cared too much about the ethical or ecological or economic, considerations in how they actually did their business or how their supply chain worked. They didn't really worry about that. But once it comes to the front, once the consumer finds out about it, then ultimately that can impact your brand really, really severely. So we're really looking at getting visibility that enables us to have understanding of our end-to-end supply chain, which allows us to see all of our costs, constraints, and risks, so that we can actually control the impact and ultimately, drive a better value, not just for the shareholder, but for the wider stakeholders as well.
Okay. Before I go to the next slide, I want to state that this webinar will be recorded, and we will hand out the slides PDF within 48 hours. And you can start ask questions right away. We have a Q&A at the end. But if you have a question that is in line with what we're discussing right now, feel free, and we'll pick it up to make you more engaged and get to the answers right away. So getting back to end-to-end supply chain visibility. So we have created with some companies like Unilever, HPE, Johnson & Johnson, Henkel, and some others. We created this slide of what is end-to-end supply chain visibility. So you see on the left side, you see your raw materials, and you see your tier end sub-suppliers. That's upstream. In the middle, you have your stack of IT systems from ERP, warehouse management, TMS, order management, SNOP, and so forth and so on. It's a whole stack of all kinds of systems. That's internal. And then on the right side, you have your downstream supply chain, which is distributors, wholesalers, retailers, and your end consumers or patients. That's your end users. So this basically is the view from an OEM manufacturer. And you see different kind of focuses. Upstream, you talk about supply chain risk and compliance, just what Sean mentioned. Total landed costs, inbound material and products. And then you have your internal focus. You talk about supply chain segmentation, cost to serve, capacity, network, and constraints. What can you promise? That kind of stuff. And downstream, it's demand variability, customer profitability, and delivery status. So as you can see, finally you have a picture of what is end-to-end supply chain visibility. And you see, on an operational level, on the lower level, you have your orders in your ERP system, to a more strategic level. And also it has to do with your horizon on the short term and on the long term. So we have translated this framework into an end-to-end supply chain visibility assessment. And basically we have come up with 30 processes within your supply chain. So upstream, you have 10 supply chain processes. Internally, you have 10 processes. And downstream, you have 10 processes. So you have your upstream or inbound on an operational level, on a tactical level, and a strategical level. And it's the same internal and downstream. And basically, Sean has made some samples. Your visibility on the operational level, that's your flow of goods, basically. On a tactical level, it's your information layer. You talk about capacities. What do you know what you can produce or what you can sell? That's on the tactical level, mostly on a monthly cycle. And on strategic level, that's your financial layer. on the upper left side on top, do you know that your strategic supplier is financially viable, that they will be around within a year's time, especially in this COVID-19 era? Do you know that your strategic suppliers will be around next year? And in the same way, downstream, do you know that your channels will be open to sell? And that's why Unilever, decided to pay their strategic suppliers earlier and to pre-finance their channels to make sure that they still would be able to sell. So we created this framework, and basically we have translated this in an open available assessment. So you can download this assessment online on the website of Supply Chain Movement. So each of these boxes has 3 yes/no questions. Either you have it or you haven't. And if it's 3 times no, it's a white spot. It's 3 times yes, you have it 100% covered, and 1 or 2 yeses mean in progress. And basically, as a result, you will get this. You will get a kind of Tetris schema of your supply chain processes, and you will see the 100% colorized processes are in order. The 50% colorized are in progress, and the white ones, there's work to do. You have your white spots. It's 0 out of the 3 questions, so you have to deal with that. And basically, getting back to the first webinar, we talked about your strategy. Depending on your strategy, operational excellence, product leadership, or customer intimacy, you will decide this 7 white spots where to start. For an operational excellent company, you would probably consider that your operational white spots are way more important than strategic ones. And on the customer intimacy area, you probably will see that your downstream white spots are more important than your upstream ones, and so on and so on. So basically, we have translated, with the help of a lot of supply chain practitioners, into a practical assessment, free downloadable, and a lot of companies are working with this. First, internally to say, okay, are we agreeing upon this, that this box of on-shelf availability, for example, is a white spot or not? And if so, you can discuss it, do it by division, by product group, or geographical area, and then you can also compare notes to colleagues somewhere else, and then you have a better understanding where you could improve. So this is what we have done. So this is open. So this is, finally, just what Sean has mentioned. We've cracked the nut. What is end-to-end supply chain visibility, and make it more practical? Something to add on your side, Sean, about this?
No, I think your point's valid. That it's not just a strategic initiative or a tactical initiative. It has to combine all of those, really. I mean, structure should follow strategy. And if you want to understand where your weak spots are, you can't really try and control things that you don't understand. So you have to drill down into the supply chain to understand where you're compromising the delivery of your strategy in order to be able to take the right actions to improve. So I think this is it's a good framework to sort of identify, where you've got strengths and where you've actually got some opportunities for improvement.
Yeah. So basically, if you have done that, you can also have a better conversation with your peers, or even with consultants where to look at. You are better prepared to improve. We did also a survey about the investments, and then we talk about new technology, upcoming technology. Again, end-to-end supply chain visibility and S&OP are the highest ranking investments, and still a lot of ERP. But basically, what we saw, a lot of immature companies need to upgrade their ERP. So the basic level of your financial and order administration. But a good interesting thing is that prescriptive analytics is one of the highest scoring investments among the more mature supply chains. So that's interesting. So Sean, I was wondering, how will things evolve in the 6th wave regarding real-time planning and that kind of stuff?
Well, I think this is one of the big realizations that we've kind of got by in the past by basically having a plan, and we know that plan's been going to be incorrect, but we think we can manage the deviations from that by a high level of sort of efficiency and skilled in the process of chaos management. But now in this sort of sixth wave, in this new upswing period, with the e-commerce is completely exploding. We're getting much more demand sensing capabilities. Lead times have gone from 5 days to same day. We're just finding that we're just simply too slow. As humans, we're too slow. Our inability to process vast amounts of information is too limited. We're getting signals and unstructured data, and as well as structured data from a whole wide of sources. And we're just not able to sort of process that amount of data and that number of variables. And our forecasting is it's always been inaccurate, and that's one of the things that we've known for years, is that we try to minimize the level of inaccuracy, but it's always going to be inaccurate. Now it's just it's too slow, it's too infrequent, it's too inaccurate to handle these kind of sort of volume of demand signals, and expectations from consumers to supply with increasingly shorter lead times. Things we call black swans are becoming less and less, irregular and more grey swanish in their shape and appearance. Our behaviour is becoming more and more irrational the more we move away from sort of a single source of supply, specifically in things like retail, where we used to just focus on putting product into a one big box retailer. Now it's all e-commerce, and it's buying on impulse, delivery by single orders. Being able to track and manage that, by using old school tools and techniques is just not possible anymore. The consumer expectations now are far too demanding, and our supply chains, in order to basically just operate, need to become more and more real time in their behaviors. We, as Homo sapiens just simply don't have the capabilities to do that. So we need technological support, and it goes beyond just pure ERP transactional level support, where we need something that sort of records the data and allows us to report on it the next day. It has to be much more real time. It has to be much more sense and respond.
So Mark Engel, the Chief Supply Chain Officer of Unilever, said a few years ago, agility beats forecasting. So if you are agile, that's way more important than to forecast nowadays.
Yeah, I would agree. And I think when you look at things like DDMRP and sort of these sort of new approaches that are coming up, which is sort of realizing that the ability for us to sort of have one big plan and to pretty much guesstimate what people are going to want and where we need to put products is incredibly limited now. And agility and responsiveness is the name of the game, specifically in anything that's consumer facing. And that moves us away from sort of just adherence to a single plan and having one single set of numbers to actually being much more sort of sense and respond capabilities.
Yeah, and you're talking about black swans. Those are the unknown unknowns. But even that's COVID-19. But Brexit, we know it's going to happen. But still, to me, it's a rather black swan.
Yeah, well, I think you're right. It's a swan we see coming down the canal, so to speak. But again, the shape and form of that we don't really know. Are we going World Trade Organization rules? Is this a hard border in the North Sea going to be an issue? We don't really know exactly what the shape and form as it is, and there's too many companies playing and they're having to play a sort of wait and see and respond when the facts become real. So you can kind of do scenario planning, which you talked about quite a bit last time. And I think that's quite important to do is to scenario plan, but ultimately you need to be responsive once the facts become known.
Yeah. So how will the use of data change in the fifth wave and to the sixth wave?
Well, we moved. I mean, the fifth wave model. When I started work in ERP, it was all about capturing data and moving away from getting lots and lots of little spreadsheets and getting onto one ERP system. So we decided what we were going to sell and make. We sold that product. We got paid for selling that product. We updated our systems, and our ERP system produced a report at the end of the day, or the end of the week, or the end of the month that told us exactly what had happened, and everything was done through the rear view mirror. I guess we were running the business through the rear view mirror, or as I sometimes like to say, we were controlling the airspace by looking at the landed planes. We looked at the planes that had landed, looked at the condition, looked at which ones arrived on time, which ones crashed, which ones landed late, and we were using that information in order to plan how we were going to control the airspace moving forwards. And that simply isn't good enough anymore now. Now, in the sixth wave, we need to keep our eyes on the airspace right now. And we're using the information that we're capturing about what's happening to shape the form and function of the products that we sell, and then making money. And so we're being driven by insights rather than just simply recording transactions. And as consumers experiment with products, they're coming back in, that information is coming back in, and it's helping to shape what it is we do and how we sell it. So there's a lot of stuff around things like lean startups and agile methodologies that mean, this ability of the organization to be in control, to be at the center of the universe, and to simply decide what we're going to make, where we're going to sell it, how we're going to market it, and for the customer to just toe the line has gone. Now the consumer is at the center of the universe, and the company needs to be much more agile, much more flexible, and adapt its services and its offerings to the consumer demands. So it's much more information and consumer driven rather than being sort of firm driven.
So how will supply chain will be managed in the sixth wave?
Well, it creates an exponential level of complexity, doesn't it? And unfortunately, most of this complexity is just far too much for us humans to handle using our traditional methods. So we need to move from these sort of descriptive tools, which describes what's happening, which is a big advantage, into sort of more predictive tools, and then from predictive tools into prescriptive tools, where we're working on recommendations. But then the sort of optimal supply chain model that most companies are looking to, and you mentioned Unilever before, and Mark Engel, but J&J are also doing it, and Merck are doing it, is they're actually moving towards a sort of lights out, hands off, cognitive operating system, the sort of self-driving, self-aware supply chain, where effectively, as long as you've got a forecast that was in a certain degree of deviation, or a demand plan that's within a certain degree of deviation, you can almost let it go, stop touching it. And that takes some of the, the bullwhip element out of the supply chain, because you're simply not touching it. And then it basically produces recommendations when that demand moves outside of, normal demand deviations. And it says, look, this is what's happening. This is what I recommend you do. These are the kind of people I recommend you have a meeting with. Here's all the information This is what we did last time. And then it helps us to also simulate those complete black swans and scenarios. But assuming it's within, expected deviations, then actually what companies like Merck, for example, are able to do is basically take the hands off the wheel and just say, you run it. The AI effectively control tower runs the system. And they're using tools like ERA, for example, where they communicate with it predominantly by voice. They ask the system questions about,
Yeah, I saw that. It's amazing.
Yeah, it is incredible. I mean, I saw Alexandra De Luca presented it to me back in, maybe about 3 years ago now, and it kind of blew me away, because the competitive advantage that enables companies to have, where you're really focusing on asking the right questions and not just spending all of your time managing transactions and just trying to figure out where the hell we are right now, but you're just able to ask the system, how am I doing on my inventory levels at these particular locations, and it's telling you exactly what SKUs to keep an eye on and which ones are perfectly fine. It allows the business to focus much more on strategic stuff than just pure transactional stuff. And the competitive advantage that those companies are able to gain through the use of these tools is enormous. But, and it's a big but, the old rules still apply. It can only be as good as the things you feed it. So that, the old adage about garbage in, garbage out is still absolutely true. You can't put a world-class cognitive operating system on top of rubbish data. You have to, if you're going to build a skyscraper, you have to still lay the foundations. You have to dig deep on this. But if you can do that, if you can get control of your data, then of course you can now use these tools to basically have, more insights into your supply chain than ever before. But also let it do the grunt work, let it do the repetitive rules-based stuff, and actually focusing on adding value.
Yeah. So it's like asking Siri about your supply chain and get some answers, or Alexa.
Exactly that. Yeah, it's a narrow AI system. It's it does one thing, but it's collecting data points and pieces of information, and bringing together both a mix of structured and unstructured data in order to basically identify trends that are just too difficult for us mere humans to kind of identify, and to make real-time adjustments to plans and or purchase orders and these sorts of things, so that it ultimately can react to any deviations much quicker than we would be able to.
Before we get to the next point, I got a great comment from the audience. Sounds great, but the agile customer-centric model faces some constraints in an asset-heavy process industry like petrochemical. Do you have any suggestions for industries in a heavy supply push environment?
I need to just hear that question again. I'm sorry.
Sounds great, but the agile consumer customer-centric model faces some constraints in an asset-heavy process industry.
Yes,
like chemical. Do you have any suggestions for industries in a heavy supply push environment?
Well, I think, yeah, I mean, it's a different supply chain with different strategies, and I think you're, you know, in a push model, really, what you're trying to do is to make sure you have the right supply at the right place at the right time, and this is where these sort of, you know, digital tools and through the use of you know, the Internet of Things and then the industrial Internet of Things, placing sensors in pipelines, being able to identify where you've got, you know, you've got bottlenecks, where you've got demands coming through that you didn't expect, and being able to ensure that you have much more supply readiness than maybe you had in the past, I think is going to be incredibly important. But I see the point. It's, you are more in a push model than you are in a pull model that you would have in things like retail and e-commerce. But I think that, you know, the same tools are still valid. In fact, they're probably more capable in that sort of environment where you have a more I guess steady and baseline kind of demand, and where things like, you know, I guess, you know, there's demand, pull, deviation, seasonality, that sort of thing is more known and a little less unpredictable as it would be in something like e-commerce. So I think that, you know, it's still as valid. I think it, you know, the consumer-facing things is where all the pressure is right now because of the massive change in customer expectations and the rise of e-commerce. But I still think it has, you know, it has validity, and it can allow a company to focus on more value-adding activities.
We will get back to that, you know, because we have our trend compass with the new technology for different kind of industries and different strategies. So we will get back to that point. But you know, you have to trust your Siri for supply chain. So how do you know you can trust this new system?
Well, that's a really interesting point. I mean, I remember when I put in transport planning and vehicle scheduling, I learned a big lesson back in the very early 2000s, where we put into Australia version 2 of APO, or as I like to call it, the version that didn't work. And we rolled out a sort of very bleeding edge rollout of SAP, biggest SAP implementation of the world at that time, where we put out TPVS and mobile sales orders and stuff into a business that quite simply wasn't ready for it, didn't understand it. And one lesson I learned was it didn't really matter how accurate the number the machine produced. If a human didn't understand how it came to that number, it wasn't going to trust it. And ultimately, they would have a secondary plan, usually on Excel, running alongside the, in this case, the APO system. And that was the real plan. That was the real plan that was running the business. So there's been this sort of human design that says, you know, I really like having this sort of level of technological support, but ultimately, I want to understand how it came up with that number, because if you're going to ask me to put my name against that number, I need to understand it. So we look for these what I call glass box solutions at the moment, where we need to be able to understand the algorithms, we need to be able to understand the calculations, we need to understand the assumptions that you use to come up that number before I ultimately put my name against it. But I think that has a very short time frame. And I think the reason why it has a short time frame is the sheer volume of data that we're receiving right now. And I think as over the next 18 months, 5G gets rolled out and we really move into this Internet of Things, Internet of Everything, where the amount of data sources are going to explode exponentially. We're going to reach a point where both a combination of the advancements of the algorithmic capabilities of the cognitive computing system plus the number of data sources means that we wouldn't understand it if it told us. There's just too much data, too many variables for us to actually understand it. And really, once we begin to trust the system, then we will quite quickly move from a glass box system into a more black box one, where we're saying, you know what, we're just a bottleneck. And what's happening right now is really interesting. So systems like ERA, for example, and I think, you know, I did some work with IBM Watson solution a year or so ago. You know, we're able to, they're working very much on a sort of recommendation basis. So they're recommending to the business what actions they should take. And ERA, for example, can track and say, well, if you didn't follow my recommendations, if you made some adjustments, did that improve or worsen the outcome in comparison to if you left it alone and just let the machine actually do its thing? And I think what we're going to find is over time, we're going to find out that, we're the ones who are actually messing things up. The more we intervene, the more ultimately we tend to make things worse.
Yeah.
When we reach that point, then I think we'll move much more towards that sort of black box solution where we have the the old the old joke about the best system in the world is made up of a man, a dog, and a computer, and the dog's job is to keep the man away from the computer, and the man's job is to feed the dog.
Yeah, interesting. I got a question from the audience. You already answered it. How cognitive operating system helps productivity? And to me, it's not about productivity. You get better results when you leave it alone. So it's not about productivity of a person or a factory. If like Merck has already proven that the system is way better for forecasting purposes than the manual process, I know what to do. So
no, I agree, and it's interesting. I go back about 4 years ago when I was presenting on disruptive technology. I did a gentleman called Hans M, who works for a company called Innovating, which makes chips, silicon chips, and stuff into the electric component industry. And they were trialing some sort of, I guess, in early days, sort of machine learning demand planning capabilities. Because their forecasting was terrible, and he quite openly said, we're not very good at this. When they did the analysis into why they were so inaccurate, he basically summed it up quite nicely and said that, ultimately what they found out was that the planners were either careless or fearless. What he meant by that was they were either not very good, i.e. careless, or they were massively optimistic because they're driven by commercial incentives, or optimistic salespeople who always think they're going to hit the numbers right up to the point they can't hit the numbers. So you get sort of hockey stick model where they push volume into the marketplace at very low profit levels and drop the costs. So they worked on these sort of machine learners, and they found it was incredibly more accurate than their human forecasting capabilities. And then I asked the question that says, well, does that mean your forecasters and planners are out of a job? And he looked quite uncomfortable at that point, because no one wants to talk about the fact the elephant in the room, which is, we have a large team of people right now who do this job, but we know they don't do this job very well, and we've just proven that machines can do it incredibly better than us. So, he talked a bit about training and education and improving planning, but I guess the hushed silence in the room, because it was quite a big room of people who were at the presentation, was why do that? Why don't you just let the machines do all that grunt work, and you just focus on strategically designing your supply chain for success?
Yeah, and basically Innovating is asset heavy, push-driven environment. That's a good example for the question from the audience. All right, so we get to the point. We have covered segment 3 of the mind map, so the supply chain challenges. So by mapping out the visibility, the end-to-end supply chain visibility in your process, you will know where you have your white spots. And then we get to the final part, your supply chain solutions, and then we get to the technology part, what to do and what to choose and why. And we have seen a lot of, you have your hype cycle Gartner, those are averages, points, how to apply different kind of technology. And DHL have their trend radar. But we have seen, we have already developed our strategy compass, your different business strategy, like product leadership, customer intimacy, and operational excellence, different directions. So we decided last year to create a trend compass. And this is the second one, because, first you have your mega trends, your trends, nobody can deny, you are facing it and you have to deal with it. Globalization since the 1990s, digitalization since 2010, sustainability has been come around since 2015 in our opinion. It's happening really massively, and now you have to deal with it. Every company in their, all their financial statements and emission statements. And now all of a sudden there's a new mega trend, pandemics, that's absolutely around. So you have to go to the mega trends, and then you go inside to the macro trends. And macro trends are also called innovation drivers. And you see different innovation drivers like transparency and visibility. That's common all around. But you see also an innovation driver called convenience versus experience. Experience in a store, you want to feel stuff and experience it. Or convenience, you sell it at Amazon, and you'll get it at home. Or you want to have safety, privacy, you want to have your own stuff. And these are kind of conflicting innovation drivers. And in the blue, dark blue circle, you have cost You will low cost, is that the innovation driver? That's what you're looking at. Or you want to personalize stuff, or you want to have it sustainable. So these are different innovation drivers. And lo and behold, this is all connected to your business strategy. So in the north, you have your product leadership, the Apples of this world. In an operational excellence area, you have your Walmart, your Amazon environment. They have their operational excellence strategy. And the lower left side, you have your customer intimacy approach. So you have different strategies to fulfill the customer needs and demands and the buying behavior. So basically, in the previous webinar, I have explained the strategy compass. That's from the circle within the customer and then going outside. And then this is the trend compass. It's from the outside moving in to service your customer. So that's what we did. We created this, and you've seen a lot of technology, and now we have mapped out based on your business strategy in the environment you're in. And if you know our strategy compass, I've mapped out all kinds of companies like Nike, Novartis, ASML, BMW. You know where we're at. So you can map this strategy compass onto your trend compass, and basically you will see all kind of applications. In the dark blue circle, you have 3D printing of end products or spare parts. Those are in different strategies. So basically, we have mapped out successful applications of technologies around the world, and we mapped out where do they fit, do they fit the certain strategy on one hand, and also what kind of innovation driver is behind this application of machine learning for forecasting or whatever. So that's what we did. For example, like blockchain, some people think that blockchain is dead. No, and I explained in the previous webinar last week with McKinsey that just in Europe, 2 startups, they were invested with 100 million euros just last year alone. So people who are thinking that blockchain is dead, they don't look at the investment in startups in an area. And you see, on the left-hand side, you have blockchain for customer clearance. That's typically an operational excellence environment, to make sure that all your documents are cleared very efficiently. That's a process approach. So that's operational excellence. Whereas blockchain in a high expensive risky environment by William Grant and Sons, that's blockchain to tackle counterfeiting. That's a different innovation driver. So you see different applications. So we will publish a whole article about this, all of these 18 applications of different kind of new technology, machine learning, AI, 3D printing, IoT, blockchain, the like. So basically, with this framework, you can plot basically where you are, and then you have to look at yourself and your customer, what kind of needs do they have, and what kind of innovation drivers are fitting to that, and then you can see, and then you can select the right innovation, I would say. So basically, when you know in what kind of environment you're playing, you can neglect a lot of innovations and just focus on the ones that were fitting to you. So to you, Sean, my question is, you have different kind of innovations. We see that, but how do you define different kind of innovations?
Well, I think it comes down to your business models. Once again, the one of the things that I said in the last workshop, and I repeat it again, is it used to be very much that firms and products competed, and then around about 2001, sort of Martin Christopher made the statement that it wasn't the companies competed, but actually supply chains competed, and I don't think that's true anymore, because I think that it's down to business models, because the opening up of the digital sort of platforms has enabled both an omni-channel approach, but also an omni-logistics approach, so that the ability to bring together a unique value proposition for a very specified customer segment with a strategically aligned set of delivery capabilities is what's really going to differentiate you. And then once you understand, how strategically you're going to deliver that value proposition to that customer segment and how best to align your delivery capabilities in order to do that, you can then start to look at the right channels, the right processes, the right networks that you need. Once you understand that, then you can start to look at technology in new ways. You can say, well, what do we want it to do? Can we use digital technologies to help us to reach new customer segments that we think would appreciate this value proposition? Could we use it to provide a more reliable and responsive sort of 24-hour/7 service rather than a normal sort of 9 to 5 offering? Can we create more compelling or more personal experiences or more personal communications or better engagement with your company or your product? Again, to your point in your previous slide, it's all based around the strategy. What is it you're trying to achieve? Are you competing on cost? Are you competing on experience? Are you competing on intimacy? What is it you're competing on? From a product perspective, can you use these tools to create radical new solutions using, everything from 3D printers to just, digitizing your value proposition? Can you servitize it, offer as a service rather than offer it as a, an asset sale? Can you premiumize it? There's been loads of examples of companies who have taken very dull, boring products and made them completely attractive through innovation. Dyson comes to mind. Things that who would believe that you spend £400 on a hairdryer, something that you can buy for £20, but people do. You can start to use innovation and use things to create whole new premium offerings. Maybe you can create more personal solutions, almost sustainable solutions. Then in our process, you can look at things like RPA and those sorts of tools to help reduce the number of human errors or to streamline and align your processes. We can use these new digital cognitive operating systems to create more insights and analysis, more visibility and transparency, as we've discussed. We can redirect human effort away from doing rules-based repetitive stuff that machines can simply do better into much more value-adding activities. Or maybe we can just use robotics and things like that to create safer ways of working. And then when we look at the supply chain, we look at the supply chain network, well, knowing what automation is capable to doing, be that, collaborative robots or 3D printers or, drones and delivery mechanisms, can we make a more local and more agile and more flexible supply chain? Can we make it more reliable or responsive depending on our strategy? Can we make it more transparent? Can we make it more sustainable by, utilizing the products better or by localizing it? Can we, specifically in these COVID days, can we use these new robotic tools or autonomous vehicles to create more contact-free delivery mechanisms because people have changed their behaviors due to this pandemic? So it all comes down to the point you made earlier, which is, strategically, what is it we want to achieve? Who are our customers? What do they value? What is our unique value proposition to that? What is our unique delivery capabilities? What networks do we engage with our customers with? What processes do we need to follow? And what channels do we operate through? Once we understand that, then we can look at these technologies differently, because the technology themselves is just a what and a how, but it's looking for a why. And if we can get that why through the business model definition, then we can start to make intelligent decisions around these technologies, rather than just being dazzled by their shininess and newness and just grabbing at them hoping something works.
So what does it mean for the human skills in all this?
Well, I think I wrote about this quite a bit in my book. We're in an oxymoronic situation here. We're facing potentially a wave of technological unemployment through a lot of people, because there's a lot of people employed in doing repetitive rules-based jobs right now, just using the things on the end of their wrist to do things. But we're also going to have a skills shortage, and the reason for that is that we are increasingly developing machines that can mirror human capability, so they can do very simplistic pick, pack, load, drive, all those sorts of stuff. But actually, in this machine world, our uniquely human skills have become more and more important. So there is going to be a demand for new skills, but there's also going to be a higher level of skills. But a lot of these are skills that at the moment don't really get a look in, because we spend most of our time just managing chaos. So skills such as empathy, inquiry, creativity, adaptability, real reason and problem solving. If we can capture all of this data and allow these cognitive operating systems to make sense of it for us, to present us to this information in logical ways, then we can start to ask much more intelligent questions of it, but also to see much more strategic opportunities to provide things of value to our customers. But it's a different set of skills to what we use in our supply chain right now. So one of the danger points, I think, is that actually people tend to overvalue what they know and undervalue what they don't know. So you end up in this this world, which I think is quite nicely summed up by the Mark Twain quote that says, it ain't what you know, it ain't what you don't know that gets you into trouble, it's what you know for sure that just ain't so. So we hold on too much to our existing knowledge, and actually in this fast-paced world, we really need to, in some cases, realize that that's no longer valid. And actually the skills of the future are those that are much more human and very difficult to automate, but actually much more rewarding if you can spend your time on them than some of the things we do at the moment.
Yeah. So basically, and then we get to the complete cycle of creating a mind map. And one thing is to make sure what you don't know or what you know and and think it isn't so. Write it down in a mind map. So basically, we have covered all the 4 quadrants. So we have also covered the supply chain solutions quadrant on the lower left side. Basically you can integrate your supply chain internally. Apply S&OP. You can automate internally, get rid of your paperwork and get rid of your Excels. Basically the success of a software vendor called Anaplan. This was on Nasdaq last year, the biggest launch on Nasdaq last year. Basically, with Anaplan, you can get rid of your Excel. So there are, basic formulas, quite intelligent, built by someone who had created the Excel. But some colleague of him or her can't understand it. But basically, this system, will tell you what's behind the box in Excel with like a comic book. Cloud will say what this cell is doing, and basically you will retain your intelligence in your Excel. But the Anaplan is way more robust, and that's the way to get rid of all your Excels finally. And we should, basically Excel should have got rid of it and make it more robust. Third part is align your supply chain externally. Talk about your portfolio segmentation and rationalization, that kind of stuff. Fourth level is collaborate up and downstream. That's what just Sean is talking about your supply chain network in that area, innovation. In the fifth level, orchestrate externally, end to end. So basically what Unilever is trying to do is orchestrate the whole ecosystem, make it more profitable. So pre-finance your suppliers and pre-finance your commercial channels is done to make the whole ecosystem more profitable, not your own company. And the final part is innovate, disrupt, create your own worst enemy. Like what Heineken has done, they created Beerwolf. That's a platform to sell homegrown special beer, and it's created outside the Heineken environment, like a real startup. Of course, it was funded by Heineken, but now with Beerwolf, Heineken finally have direct insight of selling out specialty beer to consumers at home. And they are selling more specialty beers at Beerwolf from competitors than from Heineken itself. So that's the final part. Disrupt your own company, kill your own company, create your own startup. So then we get to the whole framework, and that's also getting back to what we said last week in our first part of our webinar. You start at the upper left side, and this where, or who you want to serve, but where, in which arena ecosystem do you want to compete. That's this, the former CEO of P&G has written a great book about where to compete. That's about the where. And actually, we all know Simon Sinek, the why, how, what, but the single most important question, and he forgot, was the who we want to serve, or where, in which market do you want to play. So you start in the first quadrant, where to compete, and then the why, your purpose, and you get your strategy compass we have explained last week. And then on the how, you will say, okay, your processes, and then you have your white spots, and in the end is your what should you do, like technology, innovation, and we have our trend compass. And basically, when you go through these cycles, like Amazon is doing in Unilever, if you go on and on and on, you will be way ahead of your competition, because you will be trend maker. Amazon has been a trend maker for the last 50 to 20 years. So by going through this cycle, they are becoming trend maker. And the same as Unilever, they also are a trend maker by how they approach this. So this is how to to connect all the things Sean and I have explained. And an example is we have done it last year. A quick look. This is by sweets manufacturing called Perfetto Melle, like Chupa Chupa Mentos. We created this with the whole management team. This is the shortened version. We have also a more extensive version with all the trends. But basically, they have created this, and they have created blown up posters hanging on just on not only the warehouse, the manufacturing area, the planning area, the marketing. So everybody knows what they're talking about. This is the future supply chain 2025 of a company. So you can make visible roadmap, and in the lower left quadrant you see the projects and also the order you want to implement these. So you know that project number 1 is more important than project number 2. So you have also a prioritization, and you can explain to everybody in the company why you're doing it. Getting back to the McKinsey part, if you visualize this, everybody knows how they can and should contribute to the business success, and how the supply chain is connected to the overall company strategy. So basically this mind map, and I've done it with PepsiCo, with Henkel and some others, and you can do it yourself, you don't need me, but you know, basically you can create your own visualization of your market trends, the impact on the company, your supply chain challenges, and your supply chain solutions. And by doing this, you create an overview and you can discuss about it. So basically, you know, my question next, we're getting at the end of the webinar. So Sean, what to do next?
Well, I mean, I use a particular quote from my book in talk about the new business mindset, and I said, you know, this is now really the opportunity for companies to reimagine their supply chains. I think COVID has, you know, lit a fire under lots of organizations and really just sort of pulled the curtain back to what was actually going on, but they kind of hoped that wasn't. And the other companies have been able to do that role that you mentioned ago, the sort of trend makers, you know. And you've got companies like Amazon, for example, who, you know, Jeff Bezos's when he did his job applications back in 1996, he used a quote from someone called Alan Kay that says, you know, the best way to predict the future is to invent it. Mm-hmm. You know, if you want to be on the front foot here, really, you've got to be able to take these disruptive technologies and look at them in a way that says, how do we invent our future? How do we create business models that allow us to not just survive through this current stage, but actually thrive through it? So this quote from a book here says, you know, if you knowing, you know, what happens in business day, if you had to rebuild your company today, knowing how people use technology, how they behave, what they value, and what is technically possible, would you design it in the way that it currently looks? Because if you wouldn't, if you would change that and make it look very differently, if you would disrupt it so it resembled a different types of organization, then really the challenge is for you to basically change your business models and possibly your leadership styles, your mindset, and your modus operandi. So it does, because, you know, with these new digital tools, there is a potential for new competitors to arrive who basically look exactly like the company that you think should exist and take away your business.
And similar, we discussed it last week, you know, so the more successful companies are doing business war games, and basically, you know, you will go out in teams and you will ask each team as a you know, fictional opponent of your own company, how would you kill our company? And some people are working 20 or 30 years at the same company, you know, they are very creative. Oh, I know, we should this and that, you know, and basically you will come up with what you just explained, all kind of new ideas, you know, to be innovative. And then, you know, you go do the blue teaming round in this business war game. And you explain, okay, now we know what the competition would like to do. You encounter all this, you know, ways of how the competition would like to kill you, and then you know, you will be very innovative. I've done business war games with a lot of supply chain professionals in different kind of industries, in pharma and high tech, and it's amazing. You know, even one time I did it with an executive and the VP supply chain of a liquor manufacturer. You know, they had such brilliant outcome of this workshop. She texts the CEO on the spot. You know, basically that's what you can do. So there is a new mindset to go through. All right, we're getting to the end almost. You have a nice quote here. The future is already here. It's just not evenly distributed. Could you explain, Sean?
Yeah, I mean, I like this quote. It's not a new quote. William Gibson said it back in 2003. It should quite put out there. But if you look at the tools that are available right now, there's only certain companies that can actually, you know, have took advantage of it and are capable of taking advantage of it. And that's as much to do with, you know, their mindsets as much as it is to do with their master data accuracy. And you know, there is the potential to completely reimagine the way you do business and to reimagine the way you deliver value propositions and to who you deliver it through. And if you become so wedded to the past, it stops you from being able to, you know, to embrace the opportunity and to see this as only a threat to your current business model. So, you know, let's take advantage of this bounty, this technological bounties out there, and use it to develop, you know, new supply chains, new ways of delivering value that ultimately not only deliver greater profit for your organization, but also help things like the planet.
Yeah, we are almost at the hour, but I do want to say what we have done already. You see this slide with a picture of 4 people in a 3D world in a workshop. That's what we actually have done with Givaudan in July, and we did it last week, and we're going to plan to do that more often. So basically, there's a 3D world available where you can go in with a company, people from the same company or different companies, actually meet and do 3M post-it sessions like you've seen on this slide. So what do you think about this opportunity of 3D worlds? Second Life has been around, and the gaming world has been around. Now the gaming world of 3D environments is hitting the business world. What do you think about that?
Well, I think this is exciting stuff. I think I speak at a lot of events, and the whole sort of model of getting people from different parts of the world together in a room at the same time, the sort of the go-to model that we've had for decades, has been completely disrupted due to this pandemic. So I think anything that can sort of replicate the value of that experience, but enables them to do that remotely, I think is going to have a huge value. And if you can sit around a whiteboard or have private one-to-one meetings and breakout sessions in a virtual world, I'm not saying it's as good as the real thing, but I'm pretty sure it's getting very close to it, and it's doing so at a much lower cost model than if you would have had to book out a hotel for 3 days. So I think this is really exciting, and I think a lot of companies are going to look at this and look at the value they get from this, and actually not go back to the old ways of doing things, the old sort of workshop approaches, because they're getting the sort of similar levels of value, or potentially more value, but at a much lower cost model, because they don't have to fly people around the world and put them up to hotels and book conference rooms, etc. So I think this is incredibly exciting.
And funny part is, last week,
this is still very much early days, and the more people get interested, the more investment flows into it, the better tools become, and the more richer the experience.
Yeah, I've sent out an invitation to a lot of supply chain executives on a COO level, on a European or global level, for November now, and it's an amazing list of people who want to attend on a COO level. They realize that this is the new world. I have to deal with it myself. I can't say, okay, I'm too old or whatever. They all want to go into this 3D world, meet other COOs. So we have an amazing list of people who are joining us in November, at the end of November, in this 3D environment you're just seeing right now. And you have different kind of pavilions in that environment, where you have a round table setting, you have a workshop setting, you have even a theater environment, a gallery like a museum, all kind of environments you can imagine. And they are, I can imagine that a lot of things will happen on this environment. Now, I hardly have any time for questions really, but there was one question: is the 6th wave of supply chain model much more disruptive compared to the 5th wave?
Yes.
Maybe you should watch the first episode. We ain't seen nothing yet. You're looking at a 3D world, you see computers doing the whole stuff. And another question, if technology replaces human skills, don't we face unemployment?
Yes.
Massively. So you talk about basic universal basic income. You discuss it in the book.
Yeah, so, we do. I think we did. There are a lot of people right now. There's always been in all the other previous waves, there's always been a home for someone who, has just got basically the sweat on their brow and the things on the end of their wrists to trade for money. And what we're seeing as the level of automation increases, and as more and more money gets invested in things like the capabilities of collaborative robots, drones, road robots, all those sorts of things, that ultimately the places for people to go who only have that their sweat and their labor to sell will become less and less. And that will be one of the big challenges of the second half of this century, will be how do we provide for those people who don't have the skills to compete in this new wave.
But basically, basic universal income is already taking place. In the US, Trump has signed checks to everybody, and similar thing we have seen in the Netherlands. And what I read last week, a lot of people in Italy, they're coming from the south, and they need to go to live in the north, in Milan, where all the industry is where it is. But now you see now a trend in Italy that people coming from the south, they go back to Sicily, they go back to the high heel of Italy in the south, to live there where they're coming from, and they, they can, because they can work remote. So basically, you will see in the rural areas, people getting back to the rural areas, because of COVID-19, but also that's where they come from, that's where they belong, and even in Italy, you see a move from Milan, with high cost of living, whatever, going back to the south where you're coming from, and it will. So I will see that that in Italy, the south becoming more financially healthy because of this. So I think that also that's a positive effect of COVID-19 and that area. So that also you see new changes. So getting back to the previous question, we have seen nothing yet in supply chain and business, in business and economy.
Absolutely agree. It's rocket fuel. It's been rocket fuel to the sixth wave. It really has.
So basically, I would like to wrap up, because there are some questions, but we hardly have time, and like we already predicted, probably people are already flabbergasted by all the content that we're getting. So basically, what we want to do to serve to companies, to create this mind map, this roadmap, and there are other flavors like we have done in this last 2 webinars on one hand, and we can create this roadmap. To me, 90 to 95% of your knowledge is already there in your company. You don't need consultants. It's only, you have to visualize it, and you have to find the blind spots, and have to connect the dots. So these are the things we can provide, and especially Sean can do this. He has all kind of exercises to get to the point where you need to be, and to make the right decisions for innovation. So that's what we can provide. And we can provide this 3D environment on an island where you can come together from all over the world in this island. You don't need to travel, and you have a light version on your desktop to go into this 3D world with your own avatar. All right, I would like to thank you, all the listeners, for joining. And finally, I would like to ask Sean, also thank you. But are there final wordings to wrap up this series of 2 webinars?
I think the most important thing now is, COVID has created the opportunity, and I think that really companies need to grasp it with both hands. And I think people who work in organisations need to take this opportunity to embrace this change, see what new skills are required, and to actually not just see it as a threat, because it can be a threat, but also really see it as an opportunity. And I think if you go forwards with an open mind and look at the potential, then the future for both yourself and your company could be very bright indeed.
And I see now 2 kind of companies who are standing still, put on the brakes and said, let's wait and see how we get through this year or whatever. And we see other companies who are more, gung-ho, I would say, and they join this kind of 3D environments, and they want to be fast moving forward. And then I now see the distinction of the companies who are lagging, will be probably left behind. I wouldn't say they will be Kodak, but to an extent, they will lose ground to the ones who move forward and go to the new directions and try new stuff, and connect with startups, fail fast, small kind of pilots, that kind of stuff. Right? So I already see the distinction between the companies, the future winners, and the ones that will stay behind, are lagging.
Yeah.
All right, we can go on and on, but we won't. This will be recorded, and it will be made available within 48 hours. So maybe you can send this link to your colleagues. You can download the slides, and we'll be happy to talk about possible options to do a workshop. With this, I would like to thank you all, and thank you for joining, especially if you have seen both webinars. Thank you again, Sean, for this. It was great to talk to you. Thank you.
My pleasure. Take care, Martijn.
Thank you. See you next time, everybody. Bye-bye.